Hi, my name is Bob Frank. I'm a PADI instructor, and two of the specializations I teach are underwater photography and aquarium photography. Today I would like to talk to you about techniques for maintaining the housing for your underwater camera. Before I get into talking about the techniques, I want to give you 2 pointers to keep in mind regarding your underwater housing. First, always try to do the maintenance on your housing before you leave on your dive trip. That way you have a nice, quiet, calm environment in which to take care of your equipment, and should a problem pop up, you'll have sufficient time to make the repairs and adjustments necessary so that you can have a successful dive trip. Second, never ever travel with your housing in a locked shut position, whether it's in your checked baggage or your carry-on baggage. You want your housing to be able to breathe, to be able to adjust to the temperature and pressure differences while you're in flight. And with that, never ever open your housing while in flight and then lock it shut before you land. This will cause a low pressure environment inside the housing, which will make it nearly impossible to open the housing once you are on land. You will have to wait until you get back into an airplane and reach altitude before you will be able to get your housing open. For today's demonstration, I'm going to be using a Fantasea line FG16 housing that is the companion product for the Canon G16 camera. When you purchase a Fantasea housing, you get several accessory items, such as a replacement friction O-ring and a flash diffuser, as well as some O-ring lubricant and an O-ring removal card. We're going to use the O-ring removal card and the O-ring lubricant today. Also, before I begin my maintenance, I need to have an old toothbrush and an old rag or washcloth that I can use that has been thoroughly washed and dried. To begin my maintenance, I'm going to open my housing and identify the O-ring or O-rings that are inside. Every housing will have at least one O-ring to ensure a good seal. The Fantasea housings come with 2 O-rings. On the door, you will see a black friction O-ring. It's called a friction O-ring because it rubs against the inside of the housing every time the door is opened and shut. You'll also find inside the Fantasea housing a second protective O-ring, the blue one. It's called a compression O-ring. And it's called a compression O-ring because it gets compressed to make a good seal every time the door is shut. Today we're going to perform maintenance on the black friction O-ring that's on the door. The friction O-ring needs to be serviced about every 20 or so times that the door is opened and shut. The compression O-ring needs to be serviced about every 50 times. On a normal dive trip, I open my camera housing once at midday and once at the end of the day. And therefore, on a 7-day trip, I will open it 14 to 16 times, which means if I perform my maintenance before I leave on the trip, I should not have a need for further maintenance while I am diving. To begin my maintenance, I'm going to take the Fantasea O-ring removal tool. I'm going to slide it between the O-ring and the housing and gently lift up. And as you can see, it raises the O-ring up. And then I can just slide the tool around the door there and the O-ring will pop right off. The next thing I want to do is pick up the washcloth and gently pull the O-ring through the washcloth. I don't want to pull hard, I don't want to stretch the O-ring. All I want to do is to get the old lubricant off of the O-ring and clean off any other dust or contaminants or calcium buildup that may have found its way onto the O-ring. Once I finish that, I then pick up my toothbrush and I gently brush against the track that the O-ring sets in to make sure that there's no sediment or sand or anything that has gotten into that track that could possibly cause an improper seal. Now I'm ready to lubricate the O-ring. To do that, I just take the O-ring lubricant and I put a small dab on my fingertip. And I mean, it's a small dab. You don't need very much of this stuff. And then I'll smear the O-ring lubricant between my thumb and my pointer finger, and then begin to gradually spread the O-ring lubricant over the O-ring. You can use both hands, and you just want to spread it around and gently pull the O-ring between your fingers, and you'll know when you have enough lubricant on the O-ring because it'll feel smooth all the way around. The reason we put the O-ring lubricant on the O-ring is twofold. First, it helps keep the O-ring soft and pliable, and second, it helps us when we're reinstalling the O-ring back onto the housing. I now want to clean the O-ring lubricant off of one of my hands so I don't get the lubricant all over my housing. And then I'm going to pick up the housing and I'm going to drape the O-ring over one of the corners of the housing, make sure it's in the track, and then I'm going to gently move my finger around the O-ring until it is properly seated. It'll just sort of snap into place. There you go. And then I run my finger over the edge one more time just to make sure that the O-ring is properly seated, which it is. I'm now going to clean the rest of the lubricant off my hands and do two other maintenance procedures while I have my housing open. First thing what I want to do is I want to put some moisture munchers inside my housing. Moisture munchers help keep condensation from building up inside your housing. And you'll usually find that there's some space on either side of the lens pocket that you can put the moisture munchers. I put one on each side. You can get these things at any dive shop, or you can get ones like this from the Fantasea website. They all work about the same. So I'm just going to set those in there. And the other thing I want to do is I want to check my leak detector on my Fantasea housing. Excuse me. Fantasea housings have a leak detector, and they are the only housings in this price range that have a leak detector that will let you know if even one drop of water gets inside your housing. And the way I'm going to test that, I'm going to put a little moisture on my finger, and the detection strip is on the bottom of the housing, and I'm just going to put my moistened finger on that little strip, and you can see we get a nice loud chirping sound and a flashing red light to let us know that some moisture has gotten inside the housing. I'm going to dry that off so that it stops. I know my moisture munchers are in place, and I know my leak detector is working. I believe my O-ring is properly seated, so now I'm going to lock my housing shut without the camera in it, and I'm going to do my dunk test. For that, I take a bucket of water and I slowly lower the housing into the bucket of water looking for any leaks. The leaks will come as a stream of air bubbles. You're going to get bubbles that are going to pop up from around the buttons and the knobs and so forth, and that's all okay. What you want to look for is a steady stream of small bubbles coming up, or you want to see if your leak detector starts going off. If I don't see any problems there, I can take my housing out, dry it off thoroughly, put my camera in it, lock it shut, and then get ready to go diving. When I'm diving, I do the exact same process. You lower your housing into the water this way, slowly, always looking to see if there's a leak, and listening for your leak detector to go off if you have a Fantasea housing. If you do spot a leak, the first thing you want to do is to pivot your housing so it is face down so that any water that is in there will go into the lens port area and not onto the camera. And then you want to safely ascend to the surface, hand the housing to the people on the boat, and tell them to leave it in that position until you return from the dive. At the end of my dive trip, there's some additional maintenance that I need to do on my housing. I like to take a big bowl and put about 4 or 5 inches of white table vinegar in the bowl. I then will set my housing in that vinegar face down for about 15 minutes and then face up for another 15 minutes. This will allow the vinegar to eat away any salt or calcium buildup around the lens opening around the buttons and the knobs, and it'll help keep my housing in pristine shape. After I have rinsed the housing off with water, I can then dry it real well and put it away for my next dive trip. You can reuse the vinegar, not as your table vinegar, but for cleaning the rest of your camera gear. I take the vinegar, I pour it back into the bottle, I label the bottle scuba diving vinegar, and I don't keep it in the kitchen, I keep it in the workroom. And then I can reuse that vinegar for cleaning my housing after the next trip, or I can use it to clean my knife, or my tray, or my arms, or my strobes, or my video lights. In summary, we've tried to show you how to properly maintain a housing for your underwater photography. A couple of key points to remember. First, try to do all your maintenance before you go on your dive trip so that you have time to fix any problems that may pop up before you begin diving. Second, never travel with your housing locked shut, and never open your housing while in flight and then lock it shut. Always travel with the housing door slightly ajar. Number 3, do your maintenance on a regular basis, generally after every 20 or 40 dives, depending upon which O-ring you need to do your maintenance on. Next, always do a dunk test of your housing without the camera in it before you go diving. Fifth, always lower your housing with the camera in it slowly into the water and look for any leaks before you begin going all the way down to the bottom for your dive. Next, when you get done with your dive trip, be sure to rinse your housing in a bath of vinegar in order to make sure you get any sediment off. If you have any questions about the proper way to put your camera into the housing, we have a complimentary video that is also out that will show you how to do that so you can make sure that your camera is properly positioned in the housing before you begin diving. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you have a wonderful dive trip and take some truly awesome pictures. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.